Welcome to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, your daily dose into the health and wellness world.
Welcome back to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, where we dive into everything health, fitness, and nutrition related 5 days a week in 5 minutes or less. This podcast is brought to you by Umzu, and I'm your host, Tyler Woodward. Today, I'm going to give you the dirt on this new erythritol study that everyone's been talking about. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're not aware, erythritol is a type of non-nutritive sweetener, meaning that we're not capable of metabolizing it or burning it. This is mostly true, but about 1% of erythritol seems to be converted into sugars when ingested, and the rest mostly gets excreted in the urine. Erythritol is different from the other non-nutritive sweeteners in that we naturally produce it, and it has a very high rate of absorption in the intestines at around 90%, according to one study. The study we're reviewing today in particular was very interesting because it found a very strong correlation between elevated levels of erythritol in the bloodstream or in serum and the incidence of heart disease. This study was really a bunch of studies that combined them together into one big review. So first they looked at a cohort or populational study of about 1,100 individuals and assessed various blood parameters and then compared these to the incidence of major adverse cardiovascular events. Across all the individuals, both with and without type 2 diabetes and coronary heart disease, erythritol was independently associated with an elevated risk of having a major adverse cardiovascular event in a dose-dependent manner, meaning that the higher your erythritol levels are in your blood, the more likely you were to have a major adverse cardiovascular event. This would classify erythritol levels as a useful indicator in predicting cardiovascular-related outcomes, i.e. whether you're going to come out with heart disease, heart attack, stroke, etc. As in, when erythritol levels are elevated, there's a higher likelihood of having one of these adverse cardiovascular events. But this does not show that erythritol is having a causative effect itself in these cardiovascular events. Another way to think about this is that having high levels of erythritol may be bad, but we don't know if the erythritol itself is causing these effects and what is bad, or if something else in the system is causing your erythritol levels to be elevated. This is very relevant in this study because, as I mentioned before, erythritol, while it's used as a non-nutritive sweetener, is the only non-nutritive sweetener that we actually naturally produce. In the case of erythritol, it seems that we only produce significant quantities of it when things are not going well metabolically, things like metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance. In my estimation, erythritol seems to be like a way of our cells ejecting excess sugar out into the bloodstream from inside. In the second and third parts of the study, the researchers tried to determine whether consuming dietary erythritol would have a negative effect. To do this, they looked at in vivo data, which involved the extraction of human blood and the injection of erythritol into the samples compared with a control group to examine the effects erythritol had on platelet adhesion. For those that don't know, platelet adhesion is what allows our blood to clot in order to resolve wounds in our cardiovascular system or heal wounds, but it also occurs in thrombosis, which is when a piece of your blood breaks off and you get a blood clot, things like heart attack or a stroke. The researchers again found that elevated levels of erythritol was associated in a dose-dependent manner with platelet adhesion, implying that erythritol may have a causative role in blood clotting. Finally, as the third leg of the study, they took 8 individuals and fed them 30 grams of erythritol and tracked their blood levels of erythritol over 48 hours. They found that erythritol levels were significantly elevated, way over what they predicted would result in increases in platelet adhesion, and they stayed elevated over normal levels for the entirety of those 48 hours. In the discussion, the authors state, "Our findings suggest the need for further safety studies examining the long-term effects of artificial sweeteners in general and erythritol, specifically on risk for heart attack and stroke, particularly in patients at higher risk for cardiovascular disease." So here are my thoughts. First, I've never been an advocate for artificial sweeteners, whatever the type. So I do think this provides some additional evidence to avoid them over good old cane sugar or honey. The study mentions that erythritol has been viewed as a seemingly harmless food additive that does not seem to affect insulin or fasting glucose levels or overall glycemic control, but the long-term effects have not been elucidated adequately, or at least to the authors. They also do mention the pentose phosphate shunt and our endogenous production of erythritol, saying that our natural erythritol is just a fraction of what we might consume in an erythritol-sweetened meal. A few criticisms I saw of the study was that erythritol levels are known to be elevated in disease states like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, or metabolic syndrome, so this doesn't show that erythritol itself is causing these problems. I agree that the evidence displayed in this study is not definitive evidence that erythritol is going to cause you a cardiac event or anything like that, but I would like to know if erythritol consumption has an effect on erythritol production, meaning that if elevated levels of erythritol are bad when produced endogenously, then it would be interesting to see if consuming erythritol increased or decreased our own production of erythritol, as that might provide some additional mechanistic data. The other criticism I saw of the study was that 30 grams of erythritol was way more than you consume in a sugar-free or keto-friendly snack, which is what it's often used in. They did account for this in the study, and being that erythritol is believed to be about 70 to 80% as sweet as regular sucrose, and you can easily find 60 plus grams of sugar in a sugar-sweetened beverage, I think 30 grams is a reasonable amount to measure. Overall, I do think it's really interesting to see some more data coming out on the downsides of these non-nutritive or artificial sweeteners. I think erythritol is particularly interesting because it exhibits such high degrees of absorption compared to a lot of the other ones, which are mainly passing through the colon. Regardless, I will not be advocating for the consumption of artificial sugars anytime soon, but let me know what you all think and whether you'll be changing any of your favorite snacks. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and to share it with a friend. Remember, these opinions are my own, based on my own research and experiences, and is not medical advice. Till next time, be good.